In at 10, The Joker. Mad Love is one of the most beloved episodes of Batman the Animated Series, but the story of the episode was first told in the show's tie-in comic, The Batman Adventures. The story provides an in-depth look into Harley Quinn's origins and the full extent of her relationship with the Joker. After her anniversary plans end up being thrown out the window by Mr. J, she decides there's only one way to win her Puddin's affection: capture and kill Batman. And she succeeds, but the Joker isn't happy. If anyone's going to take Batman down, it's going to be him. And so he lashes out at Harley once again, leaving him alone with the Dark Knight. The two fight, but Batman's able to use Harley's successful scheme to his advantage, taunting the Joker that she came closer than he ever actually has to killing him, and concluding the jab by calling him Puddin, which is one of the funniest things I think Batman has ever done, because, you know, he's usually like a brooding and dark hero who refuses to kill despite all of his darkness, but I mean, like, come on. He called his greatest enemy by his girlfriend's pet name, and that's probably one of the best Batman moments ever, but it's still a stupid way to beat him, if we're all being honest. In at 9, Ultron Vs Thanos. Ultron Vs Thanos is an idea that we've been asking as comic fans for a while. However, this question was actually answered thanks to the Disney Plus series What If. In the 8th episode of season 1, we got to see what would have happened to the MCU if Ultron had won and gotten into the Vision's body. If the heroes had failed to steal it and put Jarvis's code inside, Ultron would have wiped out everything, apparently, using the Mind Stone and his vibranium body to decimate everything and everyone, until only he remained. However, it was certainly easier to do this after Thanos showed up with the other 5 Infinity Stones. We expected a climactic and epic battle, but instead, what we got was honestly pretty realistic. Ultron as Vision simply says fascinating and then uses his Mind Stone to slice Thanos in half, resulting in him collecting all the Infinity Stones at once, and then just ruining everything else, showing us that the worst mistake in the MCU was killing Vision before Thanos showed up. In at 8, Reverse Flash. A pride point for speedsters, especially evil speedsters, is how fast they can move, how they're faster than a speeding bullet, and how they're basically impossible to hit. So imagine our surprise when Reverse Flash ends up getting popped in the head by none other than Thomas Wayne in the Flashpoint timeline, so Barry could access enough Speed Force to save the world and bring his son back. Well, bring Thomas's son back. And while this apparently killed Thawne, that was far from it. Thawne started vibrating so fast as he could actually slow the destruction of his brain, and this actually gave Thawne more time to try and avoid death, and gave him the ability to hold the grudge. Humiliated by getting killed by Batman of all people, Thawne sets out to be even worse than usual, even ripping up the letter that Thomas gave Barry to give to Bruce, the only contact that Bruce had with his parents since they had died. Well, the only contact a living version had, which is absolutely brutal, okay? Batman was ugly crying. It was kind of weird. But I mean, come on, a speedster getting shot in the head, it's pretty dumb.
In at number 7 is the Superman Revenge Squad. After discovering the planet of the Superman Revenge Squad, Superman wastes no time at all and charges at the planet with a full frontal assault, armed with nothing but his abilities and a strange package attached to his chest. The Revenge Squad fires all their most dangerous, most powerful weapons at Superman, firing everything they think will take out the Man of Steel. They all impact on Kal-El, and the villains think they've won. For a moment. But when the dust settled, they didn't even leave a scratch. Instead, the package on Superman's chest detonated, encircling the whole planet in a layer of mist. Now, Superman then yells down to the villains from the heavens, explaining if any of them pass through the mist leaving the planet, they will suffer total amnesia, forgetting any hatred they have for Superman. They can remain trapped on their base, being angry and upset, or they can rejoin the cosmos devoid of all grudges. Either way, he doubts he will ever see them again, and then he just flies on back home. And in at number 6, Simon. Simon Jones is a villain of the Teen Titans who has vast telekinesis and telepathic powers, and he is also the leader of the Fearsome Five. All of that, but he basically just calls himself Simon. But cool, because there's a P in front of it, so we know that he is a psychic dude, I guess. Cool. In Salvation Run number 2, Simon is among the new Injustice League when a bunch of villains, including them, get exiled to an alien world. Simon, who is standing among some pretty big name villains, attempts to convince his fellow supervillains that escape is impossible, and so he then proceeds to lay down plans for beginning a new civilization, involving all the female villains getting pregnant and giving birth as soon and as frequently as possible. But luckily, the Joker is also here, and he doesn't seem to be a fan. Joker very abruptly interrupts Simon, tossing a rock that hits the guy square in the noggin, and then running up and smashing Simon over the head repeatedly with a rock, assuming control. Number 5. Captain Boomerang. This brutal defeat is so quick and so abrupt, there isn't even much I can really say about it other than you should never put a captain up against a general. In 2016 Suicide Squad, in literally the second issue, Task Force X are sent on a mission to Russia to retrieve or destroy an unknown device. Well, turns out that the device is actually a portal to the Phantom Zone. Rather than leave it be, which would probably have been smart, Captain Boomerang approaches the portal and is almost instantly incinerated down to his ankles by none other than General Zod, using his heat vision. I doubt the Boomerang guy would have been able to help much in the squad's fight against Zod, and honestly it's a miracle any of them survived at all, but I never expected this to happen so abruptly and to one of the main members of the squad. And in at number 4 is Mr. Mxyzptlk. The villain known as Mr. Mxyzptlk is both incredibly powerful, but he also doesn't really do anything that bad. He's usually just a big old nuisance. In Superman Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, a whole bunch of Superman's villains all make their play on the Man of Steel, and when their threat is ended, Superman is still left wondering why the heck this is all happening, when he realizes the only villain that wasn't among them was the fifth dimensional imp himself, which is when he finally reveals himself. He goes on about how, being completely immortal, he gets really bored. He spent 2,000 years just floating around doing nothing, and then 2,000 years doing good deeds and being nice, and then he spent 2,000 years being a mischievous little imp, and now, of all times, he decides he's gonna start being evil, and his first evil act is to kick off the next 2 millennia, well, by taking out Superman. That's basically what he says. But I don't think it was like that. Anyways, Mr. Mix reveals his horrendous true form and goes on the attack. Unfortunately, Superman's girl Lois Lane figured out what to do. Superman grabbed the Phantom Zone projector, and as he was about to use it on this magical imp, Mr. Mix spoke his name backwards, which would return him back to the 5th dimension. Unfortunately, this happened simultaneously, and Mxyzptlk was torn in half between both the Phantom Zone and the 5th dimension. And apparently Superman did this completely on purpose, and then he runs off to go and sulk about it. Number 3. Dinosaurus. The Viltrumites from the Invincible comic series are a race of near invulnerable, incredibly strong, world-conquering aliens, but none among them stands as strong and as invulnerable as Grand Regent Thrag. Battle-hardened over thousands of years, only the most powerful characters can even hope to stand mano-a-mano against this powerhouse. David Anders, the villain known as Dinosaurus, is not one of those characters. While Dinosaurus is very strong, it's more so his intelligence that is his greatest weapon. Dinosaurus allied himself with Invincible around issue 90 of the comic, and in an attempt on Mark's life by Thrag, Dinosaurus comes to Invincible's aid, which he had to know would not go well. Dinosaurus attacks Thrag, but his claws shatter like glass on Thrag's skin. Thrag then proceeds to pummel Mr. Anders, only stopping when he was distracted by an explosion. This brief moment of pause gave Dinosaurus the chance to chomp on the Grand Regent's head, but unfortunately, just like his claws, Dino's teeth also completely shatter, not even leaving a scratch on Thrag, which gives Thrag the chance to first mock the guy, but then break his jaw and leave him to think about his mistake. And in at number 2 is Vulcan. In recent years, the red planet that was formerly known to us as Mars has become home to a group of mutants known as the Iraqi, who renamed the planet to Arakko. These mutants differ from the Krakoan mutants we know by years and years of a constant battle for survival. Because of that, the Iraqi are a warlike people. They despise weakness and take on almost any challenge as a means of strengthening themselves. Because of this, duels and challenges are a key part of Iraqi society. Now, the Iraqi are ruled by a group called the Great Ring of Arakko, which is made up of almost completely Omega level mutants. One of those mutants is an incredibly disliked guy by the name of Tarn the Uncaring. Now another Omega level mutant who is also pretty unliked by a lot of people is a guy by the name of Gabriel Summers, aka Vulcan, who wields massive energy manipulation abilities, which he can use to take away mutant powers. The problem is, Tarn's ability is also to take away mutant powers. As part of a big convoluted plan, Vulcan challenged Tarn for his seat on the Great Ring of Arakko, which all comes to a head in X-Men Red issue 3 from 2022. Just as the fight begins, both mutants simultaneously negate each other's powers, turning their fight into a straight up physical altercation. At first, Vulcan gets in a few good hits, meaning 2. He gets 2 hits. But he didn't seem to take Tarn's face tentacles into account, one of which catches Vulcan's fist, allowing Taron to land a face-shattering punch. He then grabs Vulcan's arm with one hand and completely snaps it, then slams his face into the Coliseum floor and crushes it with 3 swift punches, winning the fight. And in at number 1 is Taron the Uncaring. Ooh, surprise! You thought that was the end of the story. Well, nope. Right after Taron has turned Vulcan into a floor decoration, he celebrates his win, exclaiming that he is unkillable and asking who will challenge him now. And to his surprise, someone answers. You see, another powerful mutant who is also hanging out on Arakko is none other than Magneto, who has been featured a few times in this series. Magneto comes floating into the Coliseum with his helmet and calls Taron a stain on the planet, challenging the recently victorious mutant whose psychokinetic power-stealing abilities have now returned. But if you think that will put Magneto at a disadvantage, you are sorely mistaken. Araki combatants are allowed to use weapons outside of their powers, and like I said, Magneto had his helmet, which, if you are unaware, blocks mental powers. Before Taron even finishes his sentence to accept the challenge, Magneto uses his metal controlling powers to slam his helmet onto Taron's head, blocking his powers from being used, and then, in one swift move, he crushes the helmet and Taron's head like a can of pop. It's so fast and so ruthless, and it's the most badass moment I have ever seen.
Number 10. Iska loses in victory. I love this defeat because it happens in the form of a victory, which is pretty weird and pretty great. This takes place when Iska is challenged by the Fisher King to a battle of loss, in essence challenging Iska to see who has felt and experienced the most loss. In this way, the Fisher King kinda sneakily defeats Iska by making her step down from a direct battle after feeling the weight of all she has lost as a result of her powers. And the weird thing is, technically she wins the fight because she feels more loss, but in doing so she kinda loses in the way that the Fisher King wanted her to. While Iska's mutant power is to never lose, challenging her in this way basically ensures she will win. So having to feel and reflect on all the pain she has suffered and caused. As such, this causes Iska to leave Arakko, planet Arakko, unable to carry on, at least momentarily, in her fight against her fellow mutants, and causing her to step down from her place on the Great Ring, which many people feel she no longer deserved as someone who so deeply betrayed Arakko during their fight against Uranos. Even if it was, her own powers that compelled her to do so. And Iska's obviously done that before a few times. They were like, we're kind of over this. Especially when Iska just walks in and is like, well, I'm back. I'm also helping you guys run this, right? I can't deny that I would also be like, Iska, get out of here. And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, if you love devastating defeats, whoo, you will love our Invincible playlist because Invincible is full of devastating defeats. Devastating, brutal ones, so go check that out. Number 9. Karma comes for Alexander Luthor. Alexander Luthor is the one who pretty much set in motion the events of Infinite Crisis, a major mastermind behind it all. In the end, it only makes sense that from a hero standpoint, he would have to face, some kind of justice, because that's how these stories typically go. And while initially he seems to escape pretty unscathed, at the very end of Infinite Crisis issue number 7, we see him come face to face with Karma in the form of other villains, Lex Luthor and Joker of the main continuity. While Alexander seems to already kind of be in the process of putting together his next plan, he is accosted in an alley by the 2 villains and quickly defeated, with Lex asking him as he slowly bleeds out on the pavement, "Now who's stupid?" I'm gonna spoil it for you, it was Alexander Luthor. He's a stupid one, I think, is what Lex is getting at. It's like, it's not me, because now you're dead, so. Number 8. Thor goes for the head. This defeat is devastating in kind of a different way, because ultimately after the events of Avengers Infinity War, the Avengers are left without hope at the beginning of Avengers Endgame. Here, our heroes of the MCU go to face Thanos with the help of Captain Marvel. While they do succeed in locating him only 2 days after his fateful snap, which we all saw at the end of Infinity War, they still arrive too late. Thanos at this point has used the stones to destroy the stones. Not something you can do in the comics, but apparently something you can do in the MCU, leaving our heroes without any foreseeable way to bring back those they have lost, because they have no Infinity Stones to do that with. Frustrated, Thor strikes out against Thanos, cutting off his head with a single swing of Stormbreaker and ultimately defeating him. Even more devastating actually, because with Thanos dead, our heroes are then left without any actual leads on how they might, recover the stones and return those lost back to life. So it's a defeat, but it kind of is a defeat that leaves you going, well, now what?
Number 7. Jericho vs Vigilante. Joey Wilson, aka Jericho, is technically usually a superhero, despite being the son of Deathstroke, one of the world's best assassins. The same serum that gave Deathstroke his powers and enhancements also gave Jericho his powers, but they differ largely from Deathstroke's. Jericho has a very unique and powerful ability that allows him to transfer his consciousness into the body of another and take control of them by making eye contact with that person. Unfortunately, every time he did this, a small shred of the individual's psyche remained in his head. At first, it was nothing that he couldn't deal with, but over time, possessing multiple people, he had so many psyches running around his head it drove him insane and put him on a warpath that needed to see him brought down. The rogue anti-hero known as Vigilante was the one to take on the responsibility of stopping Jericho, but because of Jericho's sister insisting that Jericho was a good person at heart and should not lose his life, Vigilante decided to not deal with this threat in a completely lethal way. No, instead, Vigilante just completely took Jericho's eyes from his head. Blind and unable to use his powers, the threat of his abilities was gone, but I'm pretty sure it did nothing to stop his mental instability. In fact, it likely made it worse. Number 6. Wally West vs Inertia. Inertia was a young villainous Thaddeus Thawne. Inertia is to Bart Allen, aka Impulse, what Eobard Thawne is to Barry Allen. He is his reverse. Now, Inertia had been raised his whole life to absolutely despise speedsters of any kind. He learned to be a villain from others, but his actions were all of his own. So, when Inertia made the mistake of taking the life of his opposite, Bart Allen, he would be made to suffer the consequences. Unfortunately for him, those consequences came in the form of Wally West, one of the most powerful speedsters ever. After taunting Wally about the fact he just took the life of his sidekick, in All Flash number 1, Wally takes the young villain, who had the potential to be reformed, mind you, and removes his ability to move at all, traps Inertia in a museum as one of the exhibits, only able to blink once every 100 years, and leaves the kid there still thinking in real time during all of this, meaning he's driven slowly and pretty surely insane. And just as the cherry on top, Wally left him facing the exhibit of Bart Allen, the man that Inertia could have been. It's an incredibly dark fate for a hero to impose on a villain, especially one that small. Number 5. Superman vs the Joker. The Injustice video game and comic books took the simple premise of an evil Superman and turned it into an awesome story with really cool moments. The designs created for the heroes are mostly really cool, and only slight variations of their best looks. The reasons that heroes and villains choose sides against one another is also really cool, and it gives some of the most ridiculous shows of force for Superman himself. But it all kicks off with one simple event. The Joker decides that he has become bored of Gotham, so he turns his gaze on Metropolis. The dark and twisted games that this character plays work really well with Batman, who is in reality just a normal human named Bruce Wayne. But when the Joker has to face someone with actual power, he is exponentially way more likely to come out on the bottom. So, when he decided to crack Superman by tricking the hero into ending the life of Lois Lane and then blowing up a large part of Metropolis, he does succeed for just a few hours, until Superman shows up at the room where the clown is being interrogated by Batman, and Superman just bursts in, ignoring Batman completely, and in one cold move, he plunges his fist straight through the Joker's chest, stopping his heart immediately. And number 4, Midnight vs. Commander. The Authority is a really cool group from DC Comics' Wildstorm universe. The two most well-known heroes from the team would be Apollo and Midnighter, who are basically like Superman and Batman respectively, only these two are husband and husband, and Midnighter is almost insane. He is like Batman, but like Batman who is also mixed with the Punisher and maybe like a bit of Deadpool. And these stories get dark. In Mark Millar's run on the Authority, a villain by the name of Commander makes the very big mistake of attacking and forcing himself on Apollo. This was a hell of a mistake, because in response to those actions, Apollo, after recovering, burns Commander's legs so that he can't escape, and Midnighter shows up with a jackhammer. And the rest is something we are kept from seeing. If you want to check it out for yourself, you may be my guest, but you've been warned, it is quite haunting. Number 3, Captain Cold vs. Johnny Quick. If you have not read Forever Evil, I highly recommend you do. It's such a dark and crazy story that sees the villains of the DC universe step into the heroic side to take down an evil Justice League from the alternate reality of Earth 3. Each member of this crime syndicate of America is a sick and twisted perversion of their prime Earth counterpart. But of all of them, Johnny Quick, the stand-in for the Flash, may be the most messed up. He's a completely deranged serial killer in his world. world, and one villain just can't stand for someone dragging the Flash's name in the dirt like that: Leonard Snart, Captain Cold. In their confrontation, Mr. Quick gets a hold of Cold's weapon, the Cold Gun, and then gloats about how he had taken the life of the alternate Snart on Earth 3, and how Captain Cold is defenseless without his finger on the trigger of his weapon. Well, it turns out that Snart singing Jingle Bells Batman Smells activates the Cold Gun voice trigger, which then completely freezes Quick's leg, which is when Captain Cold takes his big old right boot heel and completely shatters this maniac's leg. Have fun accessing the Speed Force now, psycho! Haha! In at number 2, Black Panther and the Skrulls. Wakanda, like the other fictional kingdoms of Atlantis and Latveria, is protected by a man who will do anything to protect his people. T'Challa doesn't really have the luxury of sparing those that would do harm to his incredibly advanced home, but Wakanda is also one of the #1 places targeted when an invading force wants to take over Earth. So, taking those two facts into account, when the Skrulls tried to invade Wakanda to start their mission of dominating the world, T'Challa and his wife Storm of the X-Men left those aliens with a clear message. After tricking the Skrulls into inflicting pain on their own men for information, the Skrulls sent out their best warriors for the task of taking down the pair. But, just as those toughest warriors are gone from sight, an army of Wakandan soldiers breaks into the Skrull ship and leaves not a single Skrull soul alive. While that's happening, those quote toughest warriors are turned into pulp by Black Panther, with T'Challa using their blood to write quote, "This is what happens when you invade Wakanda," on the bridge of the Skrull ship, Cold. Number 1, Constantine vs Dr Fate. It's funny, I never really thought I'd see Dr Fate as a villain, and in a way this isn't exactly that. It's more like the Helmet of Fate and Naboo himself is the villain. In Constantine Future's End, John has stolen the Helmet of Fate, who without a wearer is just a measly old artifact with one of the world's most powerful sorcerers trapped inside. Allowing himself to get ensnared by the helmet, linking John and Naboo's minds, John trapped Naboo in the auditorium of Anubis. He fairly challenges Naboo to prove that he has actually ever cared about anyone other than himself in front of the ancient Egyptian god. If Naboo wins, then Constantine dies and Naboo is free to do what he does. Despite his great deeds though, he can't actually prove that he cares about anyone. When Constantine summoned the helmet, it immediately started influencing people to come and claim the helmet and save Naboo. But Constantine had set up a man to subdue each person that was called by the helmet, and when one person didn't make it, another would be called, and then another, and so on. Each person just being used as a tool by Naboo, who didn't care what happened to any of them. He proves that Naboo doesn't give a damn, and then Naboo is eaten by Anubis, just straight up eaten. Now it turns out, even the challenge was a trick, with Constantine making a deal with the demon Ifrit, who now inhabits the Helmet of Fate in the place of and sort of alongside Naboo, bargaining with those who choose to wear the helmet from this point forward.
Bullseye and Deadpool. These guys are just perfect for each other. In Daniel Way's Deadpool, we got to see these guys duke it out multiple times as Norman Osborn has hired Bullseye to take out Deadpool, but it's not the quick and easy job he's hoping it'll be. Bullseye is operating as part of Norman's Dark Avengers, playing the part of Hawkeye, so he's got a pretty neat Hawkeye-inspired costume. These guys have some great showdowns, including the first one that ends with Deadpool taking an arrow straight to the head. Somehow these guys just can't get enough of each other though, and end up at each other's throats again real soon. In a super epic moment later in the story, Bullseye launches a missile at Deadpool, who happens to be driving a huge ass truck at the time. He Tokyo drifts the truck, whipping it sideways, and narrowly misses the rocket, which goes streaming right through the cockpit of the truck. It's a super awesome moment, and these guys have a nice laugh about it afterwards. This duo obviously has a pretty good time trying to kill each other, and that could be the reason that they never actually get the job done. Bullseye winds up having to pay Deadpool off in the end, which is pretty embarrassing when your whole thing is that you're a hitman who never misses. Hey guys, don't forget to take a second and hit that like button, it really helps us out here at Top 10 Nerd. Number 9, Thanos Arrested. Oh man, this one is great. In this issue of Spidey Super Stories, number 39, there's a story called Dog Day Afternoon, where we see Spidey and Cat team up to take on Thanos. The story opens with Thanos buzzing around in his Thanos copter, and then he's all like, whoops, drop the old Infinity Cube, while he's battling with Cat. The two part ways, each hoping to find the cube first, but instead some kid finds it, and it eventually winds up back in Thanos' hands. This leads to a spectacular showdown, chock full of hilarious puns. Seriously, these guys do not let up with the cat and dog puns in this story. Thanos winds up using the cube a second time, causing an earthquake. And the earthquake makes him drop the cube again with a big oops, and this kid from earlier picks it up and uses the cube to subdue Thanos, tying him up in the grass. In the end, Thanos is arrested by the NYPD for his crimes, and it's pretty embarrassing. In fact, the entire story kind of makes Thanos look like an idiot, but it's pretty funny and definitely worth checking out. Number 8. Lowkey vs Hulk. This epic moment from Joss Whedon's astonishing X-Men was honored in a glorious way in the first Avengers movie. After leading his alien army into New York and promptly losing to the Avengers, Lowkey is scheming for a way to change the tide and possibly get ahead when the Hulk shows up. Lowkey goes on a bit of a tirade about his power and majesty, but the Hulk is not amused. What happens next is a hilarious moment I'm sure you all remember, with Hulk grabbing the puny god and whacking him against the floor and walls with the gusto of a middle-aged man with a Terry's chocolate orange. Lowkey finds himself quickly buried in rubble and serves as a great reminder that if you're not prepared to take on the Hulk, you probably shouldn't even bring your evil empire to Earth.
Number 7. Superboy Prime takes a toll. I love Superboy Prime, he's such a brutal villain. For this point, we are headed back to Infinite Crisis, where earlier on in the same issue as Alexander Luthor's death, Infinite Crisis issue number 7, Superboy Prime is fought against by Superman of the main continuity and Superman of the Golden Age, belonging to Earth 2. The Golden Age, Earth 2. I think there's a few Earth 2s at this point. While Superboy Prime is eventually brought to his knees by the combined efforts of both Supermen and the help of Mogo and the other Green Lanterns, the fight is an epic one that cost Golden Age Superman his life in the end, leaving Kara, Power Girl, all alone. Super sad. Truly, this is a really sad fight. Consequences. We love a fight with consequences. Number 6. Magneto crushes Taron the Uncaring. Oof. In a way, some might see this fight as one between two villains. However, at the point in history that we're talking about here, the era of Krakoa and Planet Arakko, Magneto is not really a villain, and Taron even is a bit ambiguous when it comes to his role and his alignment. Although I would say, at the very least, we could consider him to be an antagonist, and myself personally, I actually do consider him, in fact, to be a full-fledged villain, because Taron is, well, he's a pretty evil guy. Based on my perception of these characters, I'm including Taron's defeat here, so that's what we're doing today, friends. At one point, Magneto challenges Taron to battle, being backed up by Iska, who's kinda tricked into supporting the fight against Taron by Sunspot. Magneto manages to defeat Taron in only a few pages, using his helmet both to disable Taron's telepathic genetic manipulation abilities and then to crush his head. Yikes. Number 5. Wonder Woman takes a life. What have I learned from this story? Don't mess with Diana's friends or colleagues. Once more returning to the story of Infinite Crisis, but this time, the beginning of it, the preamble, in issue number 219 of Wonder Woman, Diana is forced to fight against her longtime friend Superman, who is revealed to have been basically mind controlled by Maxwell Lord. Now when Diana realizes this, she heads straight for Lord, but Maxwell refuses to give up his control over Superman, promising Diana that at some point he will successfully manipulate Superman into killing Batman or Lois or even herself. She refuses to accept this, and while Lord is of course tied up with her lasso of truth, she demands that he tell her how to free Superman's mind from his influence, which obviously he's going to be compelled to tell the truth about that. Maxwell responds with simply 2 words, "Kill me." And surprisingly, Diana does just that, snapping his neck with her bare hands. Pretty surprising, although I guess, you know, Wonder Woman is a warrior, so sometimes she do be killing people. Number 4. Professor X creates an even greater villain. Time to talk about Fatal Attractions. This is the famous X-Men crossover story arc where Magneto uses his magnetism powers to pull out all of the adamantium from Wolverine. Terrifying to behold, but it inspires a possibly even more horrifying reaction from the X-Men's mentor and teacher, Professor X, who snaps after seeing this happen to Logan. He uses his telepathic abilities to completely wipe Magneto's mind, taking away, as he says, his greatest weapons: his hatred, his ego, his nightmares, Magneto's mind! It's all gone! This would be the catalyst event that would set up Onslaught, a powerful psionic entity who would manifest as a result of the combined darker psyches of both Professor X and Magneto. A devastating defeat, therefore, in many ways, considering, you know, what it leads to much later. Onslaught, I feel like, just goes on forever. Number 3. Staro reminisces on happier times. Oh, this one is truly brutal and devastating for me because, in a way, Staro was quite a misguided villain. This is like heartbreakingly devastating. In James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, Staro is cast in the role of antagonist, but Staro is not malicious per se, or at least not malicious without, cause. Staro is an alien who was captured and used for various experiments as part of Project Starfish. The Suicide Squad has been sent to basically shut down said project after the United States learned of how dangerous the project could be if unleashed on the world. When the team finally uncovers the truth behind Project Starfish, it's too late and they kinda accidentally unleash the captive, mind-controlling cosmic being Staro on the world, or at least on Corto Maltese. Amanda Waller is surprisingly fine with all this as it will destabilize Corto Maltese, which actually benefits the US, so she's like, that's cool. However, the squad decides to rebel against Waller because, there's a lot of destruction happening around them, a lot of innocent people being taken out, and they decide to take on Staro anyways. Thanks to a combination of commitment and luck, they manage to defeat Staro, but as they lay dying, Staro broadcasts their last thoughts, reminiscing on what their life was like prior to being taken captive on Earth, saying, "I was very happy, floating, staring at the stars." Sad last words. Number 2. Nova annihilates Anihilist. In Annihilation issue number 6, we see one of the most devastating villain defeats of all time. Or at least, one of the most devastating methods of defeating a villain, I would say. It's happened a few times this way in the comics, actually, and each time it's still pretty devastating. Here we see this method used when Nova takes on Anihilist and defeats him by basically, ripping his spine out through his throat. What a way to go. I don't even know if we can actually show this one on YouTube. I don't even know if I could say that on YouTube, but I did, so I guess we'll see if it makes it in the cut. It's that devastating of a moment. Number 1. Peacemaker faces his dad. This one was a disturbing, heart-wrenching, and shocking moment from season 1 of Peacemaker, a series that surprised me in so many different and delightful ways. One such startling moment happens when Peacemaker is forced to face off against his dad, White Dragon. While we know pretty early on that Peacemaker's dad, Augie Smith, is pretty much the worst role model or parent anyone could ask for, we also see that Chris Smith, aka Peacemaker, still cares deeply for his father despite all the awful things his dad has done to him throughout his life. Rather than rightfully blame his father for his messed up upbringing, which honestly he should do, Chris seems to blame himself almost just as much, if not more, making the moment when he actually faces his father a pretty tense one. Years of pent-up rage, disappointment, shame, and frustration manifest in a single instant when White Dragon goads his son into killing him, commenting on the fact that he doesn't believe his son is in essence strong enough or man enough to even do so, and in the process causing Peacemaker to snap, pushing him past the brink and resulting in, well, Chris doing just that, killing his own supervillain father, pretty brutally too, so.
Coming in at number 10 is Batman vs Prometheus. This may be one of the silliest yet coldest Batman takedowns I have ever seen. In fact, down in the comments, I want you guys to let me know your favorite absolutely wacky Batman takedowns. But for now, let me explain this one. The first time Prometheus encounters the Justice League, and specifically Batman, he overcomes them all, just showing how much of a force to be reckoned with that he is. As for how he brought down Batman in hand-to-hand combat, the villain does what all villains do and gloats about how he did it. Using his helmet, he is able to program the skills of the 30 greatest martial arts masters in the world, including Batman himself, into his body and brain for his own use. Not one to be outdone like that though. When the time comes for the rematch, Batman cheats and forces Prometheus into using an older version of his helmet, but this version had been tampered with by Batman so that instead of the 30 greatest martial artists, Prometheus now has access to the physical abilities and skills of none other than Professor Stephen Hawking. Now, Batman could very easily punch the lights out of Prometheus, who is stuck with muscular neuron disease that renders him a drooling catatonic. God, it's almost offensive, but it's just so good and such a Batman thing to do, like outthinking his opponent like that. Number 9. Magneto vs the Red Skull. Magneto and the Red Skull are on opposite sides of history. Magneto grew up in a Jewish family living in Germany during World War II, and we all know Red Skull and Hydra's stance in World War II Germany, so it's safe to say that these two villains will almost never get along. Right? In Acts of Vengeance from 1989, Magneto and Red Skull were actually temporarily united. But it's really important to note that Magneto was unsure whether this was the Red Skull that aided Germany in the slaughter of his people. So Magneto confronted him, and the Red Skull confirmed that he was indeed the original, which was a mistake. It didn't take much for Magneto, the master of magnetism, to overpower the Skull, but unlike what you might think, Magneto does not take his life. Instead, Magneto leaves the Skull isolated in a stripped-down fallout shelter 20 feet underground. He removed the ladder from the escape hatch, gave him 10 gallons of water, took out his homing transmitters, gave him no food and no light, just water, air, and his own depraved thoughts. Number 8. Peter Parker vs Kingpin. If there's one thing you just don't do, it's messing with Aunt May. After Peter had revealed his identity to the world, his past villains were all coming back to get some more personal revenge. This put his family in danger, and despite his best attempts to protect them, when an assassin tried to bring him down, he dodged out of the way and Aunt May happened to be in the line of fire. This transitioned immediately to the Back in Black Spider-Man arc, which saw Peter don his black spider suit and go on a warpath to find out who was responsible for hiring the assassin. Eventually, Peter learns that it was none other than Kingpin who hired the goon. Fisk was in prison at this time, but using an extremely large stash of cash that he somehow had hidden within his prison furniture. I don't know, it's a comic book, just roll with it. Fisk was able to get out of his cell, release the other inmates, and get about halfway through the prison before Spider-Man came crashing in. And after letting Kingpin monologue a little bit, he proceeds to lay an incredible beatdown on the Kingpin of crime in front of an entire prison wing of his underlings. But then, to make it much more personal, Spider-Man takes off the black suit to show that it's Peter Parker beating the snot out of Kingpin. Then he slaps the hell out of Fisk, threatens to spin webbing down his throat, and then explains how pathetic he is in front of all of his underlings, striking right at the Kingpin's massive pride.
And it's 7th Thanos. Remember when Mysterio said, now that is an Avengers level threat? Well, luckily he didn't say that on Earth 57780, because on that Earth, home of the Super Spidey Stories number 39 from 1979, because in those pages, against the efforts of Hellcat and Spider-Man to thwart him, Thanos attempted to seize the Cosmic Cube. However, Hellcat intervened by kicking the cube out of Thanos' grasp, inadvertently sending it into an adjacent alley where a young child stumbled upon it. Despite Thanos' persistent attempts to reclaim it though, the two heroes successfully prevented his retrieval. Consequently, it comes as no surprise that a number of heroes have risen to oppose him. However, his most humiliating setback occurred when, in these pages, he was apprehended by the NYPD. That's right, the New York Police Department captured Thanos. This particular incident may have also attributed to the fact that Thanos was brazenly flying around New York City with a helicopter emblazoned with his name, so we kinda, knew that he was there, virtually just like inviting arrest. But still, Thanos was arrested and lost that way. What the hell? And at 6, Darkseid. Bruce Wayne was not taken seriously by Darkseid. As a matter of fact, Batman uses the element of being underestimated to his greatest advantage. Batman does not kill, but he was forced to do so when Darkseid threatened Earth. The only known substance that can kill a new god is radion. So Batman shot Darkseid with a radion bullet and himself died in the process. Darkseid, for that matter, had Batman as the last person in mind that could stop him, because he thought if anybody would, it would be Clark. So yeah, up until this point, the only human or sentient being for that matter that had truly made Darkseid, the god of evil of the DC universe, cowering and running away in fear is Batman. So yeah, there you go. Batman killed Darkseid by shooting him. Halfway through, into number 5, Squirrel Girl vs Galactus. Okay, I know you all love Squirrel Girl, but come on. I get that there's a whole series called The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl, but this deserves to be on the list. This is a little much. The solo series debuted in January of 2015 and ran for 8 issues, but then was relaunched in October of that same year as part of Marvel's all new, all different branding, and was continued to be published until November of 2019 with 50 issues, for a total of 58. Both series were written by Ryan North, but in issue number 4 of volume 1, Squirrel Girl literally stops Galactus from coming to Earth by being friends with him. Come on, okay? You can't sit there typing telling me that this doesn't make this deserving of that list, okay? Like, she didn't even have to fight him, for God's sakes. Okay, that's stupid. You're just gonna talk the devourer of worlds into not devouring a world? What? No, that's not how that works. The waiter at Olive Garden can't stop me from shoving more bread down my throat, so how could you stop someone who's literally eating planets? And like, I get that you all love Squirrel Girl, but come on. I know that suggesting anything is gonna make people mad at me, but still, Squirrel Girl beating Galactus. No. Okay? No. It's nuts. In it for Justice League. The Justice Buster Batsuit is a mech suit that's part of Batman's Fenrir Contingency, which is a suit designed to take down the entirety of the Justice League. Making its feature appearance in Batman Endgame, the Joker used his virus to warp the brains of the Justice League members at the beginning of the plot. Batman was then forced to use his Fenrir protocol to eliminate his teammates before it was too late. The suit was successful in eliminating Wonder Woman, the Flash, and Aquaman, but met an even match at the hands of Superman. After a lengthy fight, they were trading blows. Superman tore through the armor and nearly killed Bruce, which would have been realistic. Until Bruce used, and I kid you not, kryptonite chewing gum to spit in Clark's face, rendering him unconscious. Come on. Okay? Like, imagine waking up to learn that you passed out because Batman spit in your face. Like, seriously, dude, please. Like, I get that we're post-COVID, but like, this wasn't post-COVID, okay? He literally kept a piece of chewing gum in his mask. He says that he keeps it in the helmet so that he can chew it and then spit it like Clark. Dude, like, okay, sure, you had miniaturized red suns on your knuckles, you had Greek supernatural weaponry, you had super fast servers and electromagnetic nerve trees for Flash, but chewing gum is the thing that takes Superman down. That's like Green Lantern being taken down by a number 2 pencil. Getting close to the end in at number 3, Cobalt Blue. While in the comics Malcolm Thawne is the long-lost twin brother of Barry Allen, he is also Cobalt Blue, one of a number of evil speedsters of the Flash that wielded the blue flame. In the Arrowverse, however, Cobalt Blue is Eddie Thawne, who's brought back to life by the Negative Speed Force in order to make him their avatar. Spoiler alerts for the series finale of The Flash, by the way. Okay, you've had enough time. To erase the Reverse Flash from the timeline, Eddie shoots himself in the heart as he is a direct ancestor of the speedster. His death created a paradox since Eddie did not leave behind any children to continue the Thawne name. So Eobard, aka the Reverse Flash, is never born. The paradox though also caused a wormhole to open up and start expanding, pulling Eddie's body into it. Then in the final season, it is later revealed that Eddie was resurrected by the Negative Speed Force in 2049 to become its new avatar. He originally worked as a scientist at Mercury Labs known as Malcolm Gilmore until he was struck by a red lightning bolt from the Negative Speed Force, mimicking Barry's origin story. However, the way his storyline ends, again, Flash season finale spoilers, is by Barry convincing him to let go of the hate and remaining the Negative Speed Force avatar. They also have a climactic battle with all of the past speedster villains that lasts like 2 minutes and then they all disappear. So yeah, Barry literally beats the Negative Speed Force talking to Eddie. God. I love The Flash, but come on, jeez. Penultimately, and at number 2, musical. And no, this isn't about Music Meister, because within the pages of Final Crisis, utilizing her legendary lasso of truth, Wonder Woman releases Darkseid's consciousness from Turpin's body, and despite being physically defeated, Darkseid's dying essence continues to drag the entirety of reality towards annihilation. Time and space crumble as the catastrophic effects intensify until only Superman remains. Engulfed in darkness at the culmination of existence, he struggles to replicate a machine known as the Miracle Machine, an apparatus that's capable of granting wishes, which had been revealed to him by Brainiac 5 during his journey to the future. Darkseid's essence resurfaces, coveting the machine, but Superman ultimately obliterates him by employing his last reserves of superpowered breath to emit a harmonious song, countering the vibrational frequency of Darkseid's life force, ensuring his ultimate demise. Yeah, Superman sang Darkseid to death, and if that's not stupid, I don't know what is. And finally, in at number 1, Batman vs Hulk. Talk about one-sided fights, right? Okay, like Batman standing up to Superman is one thing. They're within the same universe, he can get kryptonite, he's rich, I get it. Shockingly enough, Batman seemingly achieved the impossible feat of defeating the Hulk as well in the days of 1981 when DC and Marvel were still on friendly terms, and the concept of separate universes hadn't really established yet. They occasionally collaborated on crossover stories, such as what unfolded in DC Special Series number 27, written by the late Len Wein and illustrated by Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. In this extraordinary encounter, Batman unexpectedly crosses paths with a rampaging Hulk, who had been manipulated by the Joker to see Batman as an adversary. So the Hulk saw Batman and, kinda got mad and attacked him because, adversary. So Batman, recognizing his immense power, somehow evaded every single one of Hulk's blows because even one of them would kill him instantly. And then, somehow, with calculated precision, he drops a pellet of knockout gas, which disoriented Hulk, and then somehow Batman kicked the Hulk in the stomach, which made him inhale the gas that then knocked him out. So yeah, that's right. Batman kicked the Hulk in the gut and actually made him flinch so bad he had to inhaling gas that made him pass out. Yeah, that's also pretty damn stupid, but I'm not sure.
Kicking off the list at number 10, it's Tim Drake. This first Joker defeat comes in Detective Comics number 826. Kicking off the action in this story, Tim Drake, Robin, is on the run from some criminals, and barely keeping it together when a random car pulls up and offers him an escape. Taking the free help, Robin jumps on the opportunity, only to find out the driver of the said car is the Joker himself, wearing a Santa hat. Joker hits him with some knockout gas, and when Tim comes back to, he's tied up and gagged in the passenger seat of the car with his utility belt tossed out the window. While going on this horrific joyride with the Joker where he took the lives of multiple people, Tim proved just how great of a Robin he'd become by completely taking the Joker off guard by quoting the Marx Brothers. Joker loves this, but then Tim starts purposely getting the facts of his quotes wrong, distracting the Joker, who tries to correct the young Robin while Tim gets his hand free and then socks Joker with a real good punch right across the jaw. He then grabs the rear view mirror and smacks the clown over the head with it, and then jumps in the back seat where he gets the upper hand on the Joker, taking his own gas and spraying it in the Joker's face. Joker goes flying out the car door and has to throw himself off of a bridge to avoid getting hit by a truck. He got a Robin once, but he ain't gonna get this one. Number 9. Tax evasion. In Detective Comics number 180, the clown prince of crime ends up inheriting $250 million from the recently deceased King Barlow. With all this money, the Joker decides to retire from crime and goes on a shopping spree. Understandably so. In an almost too real turn of events though, the Joker has to pay the IRS an inheritance tax of more than he actually has remaining, or he faces going to jail for tax evasion. Of all the things that the Joker has done, it's tax evasion that is truly what threatens him the most. And knowing the way the government comes after people who evade their taxes, that actually kind of makes sense. But what makes the whole thing so much worse for the Joker is that he learns that the money he inherited is all fake, and the whole thing was actually a prank from King Barlow. The Joker can either admit the money is counterfeit, which would cause him to become the laughingstock of the criminal underworld, or evade the government for life for the ruthless crime of tax evasion. Instead, the Joker chooses option number 3 and decides to try to steal some money, only for Batman to stop him and put him in Arkham Asylum yet again. Coming in at number 8, it's My Smile. The ongoing story behind Birds of Prey issue number 124 doesn't really matter too much, but basically the Joker has figured out where Barbara Gordon, aka Oracle, is based at, and he shows up with all the bravado you'd expect, trying to take her off the board, relying on their previous interactions to keep her afraid and mistake prone. He goes stalking through the halls of the clock tower, but Babs, she ain't afraid. She reveals herself and the Joker goes for his attack, throwing a knife, which she intercepts, catching it on one of her billy clubs. What she can't block are the bullets he then sends flying her way. But dodging bullets seems to be one of her many skills. Trying to get a better shot, he comes even closer, bringing him within her striking range, allowing her to disable his trusty blam blam. He gets one good smack on her before Oracle uses her other club to hit him in the mouth so hard her club actually cracks. But that wasn't the only thing that cracked. Babs had hit the Joker so hard that she broke almost all of his teeth and knocked out a good chunk of them as well, destroying one of the things that the Joker prizes most: his smile.
Number 7. Sabertooth and Wolverine. These two guys have a lengthy history of kicking the crap out of each other, and their origins are even wrapped together, so it kinda seems like they're destined to go toe to toe for centuries. Sabertooth is a bit obsessive about Wolverine, seeking him out every year on his birthday and making his life a living hell. Given that they both have a crazy powerful healing factor, You would think that they'd just fight forever like Joker and Batman, but that's before Wolverine finds a sword that can nullify healing factor. He uses it to take out Sabertooth in seconds, slicing clean through his neck and sending his head flying off like a dodgeball. It's a super badass moment, and totally awesome to finally see Sabertooth get what's been coming to him. It's a comic book death though, so before you know it, Sabertooth is getting brought back to life, being brought back from hell by a cult of magic ninjas. That's just the way it goes. Number 6, Ord vs Colossus. So Colossus technically died in 2001, but it was a comic book death, and you know how those go. In 2004, Joss Whedon's run on Astonishing X-Men gave Colossus an epic return as he goes up against the supervillain Ord in issue number 5. Ord is an alien super warrior and a pretty serious dude. He once took on the X-Men by himself before Colossus had joined the team. These two have a bit of a history, as Ord experimented on Colossus's body against his will to help create the mutant cure. Experimenting on somebody usually leaves them foaming at the mouth, raging for revenge, and Colossus was definitely ready for some vengeance. Ord asks him, "Do you think you can stand against me because you're made of steel?" To which Colossus responds, "Not steel, rage! I'm made of rage!" And he just totally lays the beat down, even delivering a signature double hammer fist, Hulk style. Number 5. Harley Quinn tragedy. Working with the Joker has got to be taxing mentally, probably even physically demanding, but it's mostly the going insane that you would have to watch out for. Harley Quinn is a great example of this, and her dynamic relationship with Joker has unfolded into all kinds of different directions over the years. During the death of the family story, Joker does a whole bunch of super messed up stuff, including walking around wearing his own face that was cut off earlier, and tricking the entire Bat family into thinking he's cut off everyone's faces. If that wasn't bad enough, at one point, Harley winds up at Joker's mercy after he fails to kill her by dumping her in a vat full of chemicals. She wakes up chained to the wall, surrounded by corpses, and Joker drops a bombshell. She is not the first Harley Quinn, and she won't be the last. It's like the ultimate confirmation of her fears that Joker doesn't love her, and he's just using her as a disposable sidekick. It's an epic moment that really highlights the depths of Joker's insanity, and totally a tragic moment for Harley. If you haven't read Death of the Family, I definitely recommend it, although it's a bit on the gruesome side. The artwork is incredible, and there's some really crazy moments. Number 4, Lobo gets decapitated. Harley Quinn is an incredibly popular character, and as such, has some super epic moments and is a great provider of fan service. She knows how to deliver. In the Injustice comic, she actually ends up killing Lobo after getting juiced up by a pill that gives you super strength. Where can I get a prescription for those anyway? Asking for a friend. So Harley sort of teams up with Green Arrow and Black Canary, and the three of them wind up being followed back to Arrow Cave by Lobo. Lobo gets shot in both of his eyes by Green Arrow, and then Canary follows this up with her signature Canary cry. At this point, Harley leaps on top of the main man and tears his head clean off. Lobo is a super powerful dude, so to see him get done dirty like this is a surprise to be sure, but a welcome one. This event is highlighted by the fact that Harley and Lobo actually once had a short romance, but it definitely was not meant to last. Number 3, Composite Superman. This next one comes from way back in the 1960s, in an issue of World's Finest Comics, number 142, in which Batman and Superman go up against Composite Superman. Also known as Joe Meach, Composite Supes is a total failure in life, and he just wants to be somebody and be remembered. He somehow ends up working as the caretaker in the Superman Museum, and one day, a bolt of lightning strikes some of the superpowered artifacts and gives him the powers of all the members of the Legion of Superheroes. He makes himself a costume that's a mix of Batman and Superman styles, literally just like split down the middle like Two-Face, and he even ends up learning their secret identities. It's a crazy storyline, made even crazier by the ending. Composite Superman is totally wiping the floor with Batman and Superman. They don't have a chance, but his memories start to fade away and disappear, and he risks just forgetting everything that he's ever done. In a last-ditch effort, he tries to write some stuff down before he passes out, but just doesn't make it. It's all the more embarrassing as poor Jason Meach just wanted to become somebody, and now not even he will remember that he once had awesome superpowers. Number 2, Lex Luther Cryes. This one comes from the final issue of Grant Morrison's All-Star Superman, published in 2006. In the final issue, it seems like Lex might be victorious in the end. He's taken a special concoction that gives him the powers of Superman for 24 hours, and he uses this time to try to take over the entire planet. However, things get really crazy when Clark Kent reveals himself to be Superman and fires a gravity gun at Luthor. Things start getting emotional, and Lex is in this cloud and has kind of an epiphany about the pettiness of his hatred for Superman. Not only does he cry like he just saw the end of Infinity War, but his special concoction wears off too and he loses his powers. Lex starts complaining about how he had a vision and he could have saved the world, but Superman just lays the smackdown on him and says, "You could have saved the world years ago if it mattered to you, Luthor." It's totally awesome. Number 1. Doctor Doom vs Squirrel Girl. This one is likely one of the most infamous supervillain defeats in Marvel history. The notoriously nefarious Doctor Doom has some seriously epic evil plans, and despite Iron Man's best efforts, he winds up on top, and Iron Man is in a pretty tough spot. Luckily for him, our native nutcracker from the Great Lakes Avengers, Squirrel Girl, shows up and drives Doom to the brink of madness with the help of her furry friends. Thousands of squirrels overwhelm Doctor Doom's ship, chewing on the wires and distracting Doom himself, while Squirrel Girl helps Iron Man to escape and confront Doom. Squirrel Girl has actually taken on some crazy characters in her past, like Wolverine and Deadpool, and even Thanos. However, this defeat of Doctor Doom at her hands and the hands of 1,000 tiny little squirrel hands definitely takes the cake as one of the most embarrassing supervillain defeats ever.
Coming in at number 10 is Daredevil vs Bullseye. Imagine being the guy who continuously gets his butt handed to him by Daredevil to the point that you've been saved and brought back to multiple times with enhancements, and he still leaves you stuck in an iron lung with the ability to do nothing but stare and talk very quietly. Imagine being that guy, and in another act of attempted vengeance, you mastermind a whole evil plan to get your revenge with your limited communication abilities, and then in Daredevil Volume 3, number 27, this red-suited man without fear unravels your plans and then makes sure the jar that's keeping you alive gets filled with a toxic chemical, leaving you completely blind. Well, that's what happened to Bullseye. As Foggy Nelson said, once the deadliest man in the world, and now all he will be is a living brain inside a flesh and bone coffin. That's terrifying. Number 9. The Hulk vs Abomination. Abomination in the MCU was once an incredibly intimidating villain, and he still sort of is, but also kind of like a hippie, and kind of funny. In the comics though, Emil Blonsky is absolutely ruthless. General rule for the MCU movies for you right here. If you like a character, just imagine them doing everything they do, but turn it up to 10 and then you'll have their comic book counterpart. Mostly. What my point is here is that the Abomination is psychotic, and the Hulk is way more brutal. So, when the Abomination took the life of Betty Ross using his irradiated blood, he was not getting out of it easy. When they come head to head in The Incredible Hulk Volume 25 from 2000, it's arguably one of the best Incredible Hulk fights I've ever seen. Emil comes walking out of the water, and before he even knows what happens, Hulk is on him like shrimps on the barbie. The ground around them almost instantly becomes rubble. The fight travels underwater and through a dam, flooding a whole town. All the while, these two green Goliaths are in a close combat slog match. And then, Emil decides to taunt the Hulk, which is just dumb because it just makes him angrier, increasing his strength, and the Hulk absolutely pummels the Abomination, laying on fist after fist after fist after fist, causing minor earthquakes and leaving Emil on the edge of life with his brain exposed. It's insane. This comic really shows the relationship between these two on a level that's not really captured anywhere else, and you should read it just for their relationship, honestly. Number 8. Batman vs thugs. Have you ever played the Batman Arkham games? The combat in those games is absolutely fantastic, but it still leaves me wondering how many of these random street thugs actually survive after their interaction with Batman, because I doubt it. He hits hard, and he is pretty unforgiving about it, which serves his whole point of instilling fear, sure, but I think because these nameless thugs are cannon fodder, they essentially get the worst beatings of most of Batman's villains, and we never hear from most of them again. So that tells you all you need to know. As an example, let's talk about a group of thugs in the All-Star Batman and Robin series, issue number 7. Now this comic is written by Frank Miller, who seems to be able to get away with making Batman do pretty much anything, I guess. Like, there's no rules with Frank Miller. Like in the opening pages of the issue, Batman comes speeding into a group of armed thugs, foot first, maniacally laughing like the Joker, and talking in his head about how Gotham is full of cockroaches. He relishes in the fact that the criminals are so scared that they are disposing of each other accidentally, and then he sets fire to a bottle of bleach and tosses it into the criminals, blanketing them in fire, and then continuously beating the snot out of them while they're on fire. And then what happens next? You'll never guess, because Black Canary pops up out of nowhere, and these two superheroes just start making out and getting busy while the thugs are literally barbecuing in the background. Unfortunately, yes, this is Batman, but not my Batman. In at number 7, Injustice. You knew this was going to be on the list. The Superman of the Injustice universe has pretty much the same history as the baseline Superman, but when the Joker kidnaps the pregnant Lois Lane, it lures Superman into a trap of fear gas. In his poisoned state, Superman hallucinates his true love as the villain Doomsday and instantly attacks, flying Lois and his unborn child into space, killing them both and inadvertently causing a nuclear bomb to destroy his city, Metropolis. After suddenly losing his city and loved ones in one go, Superman goes into an honestly understandable rage, bursting into the interrogation room where Batman is learning the true intentions of the Joker and plunges his super fist through the guy's chest. Following these events, Superman takes control of the Earth and rules it as a tyrant. Fortunately, Batman forms an insurgency to try and beat this corrupted Superman, eventually enlisting the aid of another Earth's Justice League, and I guess it's a big hullabaloo, but Joker got a hole through his chest, and that's the point. Number 6, Mad Love. The Batman story Mad Love tells the story of how the Joker manipulated Harley Quinzel into becoming his almost equally insane boo, Harley Quinn. Eventually, over the course of the story, Harley decides that she's going to try and do her bubby boo proud by capturing the Dark Knight and putting an end to his long crime-fighting life. The funny thing is that Harley basically gets all the way there. Harley is meticulous over every detail and rechecks everything until Batman wakes up hanging upside down, dangling over a piranha-infested fish tank. This is when Batman pulls a trick out of his sleeve. First of all, he reveals the Joker's manipulation tactics to Harley, and that almost breaks the girl's heart. But then, he essentially tells Harley that unless Joker sees the deed himself, he would never believe that Harley could have done it. This gives Harley some grief, and so she calls up the Joker himself and informs him of the situation. This drives Joker mental, as he can't stand the thought of his girlfriend stealing his spotlight. So much so that he basically causes her to go crashing out a window, and he frees the Batman himself. In a moment of clarity, Joker realizes he could take this opportunity to take down the Batman, and I suppose he forgot that he just leveled the playing field for the Dark Knight, who quickly gets the upper hand, and it leads to the Joker's defeat. This was after the Batman admits to Joker that Harley got closer to beating him than the Joker ever has, and then adds a little extra slap in the face when he calls Joker puddin'. Number 5, Red Hood. If you haven't read 3 Jokers, please go do that. It's kind of treated as its own separate story apart from the DC universe, and whether that's true or not, it's up to personal preference, but it's a really good story. But that's not important. Essentially, it's revealed that instead of there being one person over the course of history who has been the Joker, there have actually been 3. The clown, the comedian, and the criminal. Each have been seen at different times and have been involved in some of the biggest moments in Batman history. The clown is the one first caught in the story, and he also happens to be the one who laid a crowbar-shaped beatdown on a young Jason Todd, Robin. With the help of Jason Todd and Batgirl, Batman tracks down the clown, and together, they subdue him. Unfortunately, Batman has to run off to help out with the second Joker, leaving the clown in the hands of Babs and Jason Todd. That may have been a mistake. The Joker wastes no time getting to his tactic of driving people up the wall, using his attack on Todd to drive Red Hood to the point of no return, and Red Hood introduces Joker to the afterlife with a well-placed ball of lead through the Joker's cranium. Number 4, Joker War. Joker War has probably one of the coolest Joker versus Batman fights ever. By taking over Wayne Enterprises and exposing Batman's connections with the GCPD, Joker leaves Bruce without access to his vast wealth. This is part of what leads to Bruce assuming his Batman identity full time, as the Joker's masked goons do everything to break into his various Batcaves in order to gain control of his tech and sensitive information. And the Joker is more than successful, getting a prototype futuristic Batsuit and Jokerizing it. He also takes the corpse of the recently passed away Alfred Pennyworth and reanimates it with Joker Toxin. His pretty messed up, and the climactic fight between Joker and Batman in Ace Chemicals is equally as intense. After going through an absolute slogfest against each other, Joker actually gains the upper hand, and just as he is about to do a number on Batman's face, Harley Quinn shows up out of nowhere, placing a shot right in the clown's right eye, which didn't kill him, which is weird. She then ties up Joker alongside a little bang bang boom boom device, and then straps one to herself and runs off, telling Batman that he has to pick which one of them he is going to save. Joker is pretty confident that Batman will have to save him, but then Batman, pretty confidently himself, waltzes past him and runs off to save Harley, leaving the Joker to be blown to smithereens. Number 3. Paralyzed. In the lead up to Joker War that we just talked about, Joker actually pays a visit to one member of the Bat family in particular. In Batgirl number 47, Barbara gets home and is chillaxing on the couch when she begins to realize that her things are ever so slightly out of place, alerting her to someone else's presence in the room. Like a ninja, she hurls a glass into the dark, smashing it into the Joker's grinning mug. After getting in more than a few good solid hits on the Joker, the criminal turns the tables by whipping out a small remote, pressing a button, and deactivating the implant in Barbara's spine that restored her ability to walk. The Joker reveals that his remote can apparently manipulate Barbara's body to move against her will, but even that doesn't faze Barbara too much. Instead, she starts to psychologically torment the Joker, using the fact that he is obsessed with the Dark Knight to manipulate him where she wants him. In a rather twisted turn of events, she ends up having the last laugh when she uses a sharp pipe to stab herself in the back, fully disabling the implant and Joker's hold on her. And then she hurtles that same pipe into the Joker's spine, seemingly paralyzing him. Number 2. Nightwing. In Joker Last Laugh, Joker is locked up in the slab, and was told he had a terminal brain tumor and only a limited amount of time left to live. But this was all just an attempt by those working at the penitentiary to cause the Joker to face the end of his own life and possibly come to terms with his own wrongdoings. They clearly don't understand the Joker though. Instead, the Joker decided to bring his crime to a whole other level so that he would go out in a blaze of glory. He essentially unleashed a special Joker toxin on a huge number of supervillains, turning them a bit more Joker-like. One of these villains was Killer Croc. The Bat family sprung into action, but the Robin at the time, Tim Drake, was captured by Croc, leaving only his torn costume. With the other Bat family members assuming the worst had happened to the younger crime fighter, the original Robin, Dick Grayson, Nightwing, went on the warpath. He tracked down the Joker and proceeded to lay an absolutely bloody beatdown on him. Even when Tim revealed himself and tried to stop Dick, Nightwing thought it was some kind of trick and carried on his punch fest until the Joker actually passed away. Batman himself had to step in and revive the Joker with CPR. I don't know how that works, but for a moment there, Nightwing actually beat the Joker into the afterlife. And finally, in at our number 1 spot, he stabs himself. For our number 1 spot, it only makes sense to talk about Joker's very first appearance and also his very first embarrassing defeat. In Batman numero uno, we are introduced to the Joker for the first time. The Joker has been the perpetrator of some pretty vicious crimes across Gotham, and the Batman ends up on the case. When the two first get into an altercation, the Joker actually gets the upper hand on Bruce, whacking him with a good haymaker and then a kick before pushing him off a bridge. It's not until a bit later, after the Joker has caused a whole whack more unfortunate deaths and even faced the Batman a few more times, even getting kicked in the face by the Boy Wonder himself, that the Joker makes a triumphant return. Sort of. After a whole altercation at a museum, the Joker is pursued by both Batman and his Boy Wonder. In the final climactic battle, Bruce and Robin have Joker on the ropes until Joker pulls out a dagger, trying to bring the Batman down for good. Turns out, Batman is pretty quick. Who'd have thought? And he sidesteps, causing the Joker to accidentally plunge the dagger into his own chest. But as we are all pretty well aware of, this wasn't his true end. In fact, it was just his beginning. Number 10. Blockbuster. Just like the video rental store that lives far off in a warm place in some of our memories, the villain of the same name, Blockbuster, met a very swift and some could say unjust end. Blockbuster may be a relatively unknown villain to some, and that may be due to the fact that he was primarily a Nightwing villain operating in Bloodhaven. In a tragic series of events, Blockbuster's mother passed away, and Blockbuster blamed this on Nightwing. He set out on a campaign to ruin the hero's life, attempting to take away anything and anyone that mattered to Dick Grayson instead of trying to hurt Nightwing himself. When Nightwing was at his absolute lowest in Nightwing 1996 number 93 from 2004, after a slog of a fight that moved out onto a fire escape, Nightwing had Blockbuster on the ropes, when the new vigilante, Tarantula, showed up ready to bring Blockbuster to an end. Now, in a move I just did not see coming, Nightwing leaves his morals at the door, realizing Blockbuster will never stop, and he steps aside to allow Tarantula to end the villain's life. He then went and freaked the hell out while Tarantula started to seduce him. It was really weird, but it happened. Number 9. Spider-Man vs. Firelord. I think it is a well-known fact that Spider-Man pulls his punches. It's part of the reason he is one of the best heroes, but I always forget how much he actually pulls those punches. For example, in The Amazing Spider-Man issue 270, a black-suited Spider-Man puts one hell of a beating on a former Herald of Galactus, Firelord. Previously, Firelord had been wandering the cosmos when he stopped in New York to enjoy the culture, I guess, only to be attacked by firemen and then kicked in the face by Spider-Man. Now, the Lord of Fire wants his revenge. After leading Firelord on a merry chase through office buildings, Grand Central Station, the subway system, into a construction zone, having a building demolished on top of the fiery villain, and then leading him to a gas station which explodes, Spider-Man, at his wit's end, musters all his effort and his spider sense to lay an incredible beatdown of speed, agility, and raw strength on Firelord, getting so lost in his bloodlust until Captain America and the Avengers show up to be like, dude, you got him. Chill out. And in at number 8 is Deadpool vs. Bullseye. Reading through issue 11 of the 2008 volume of Deadpool just made me remember why I love Deadpool. Not that I forgot or anything, but man, he's just nuts, which makes it so good when the foe he faces is almost just as bonkers as he is. This time, it's Hawkeye, but not actually Hawkeye. It's actually Bullseye dressed as Hawkeye because this is happening during Dark Reign, and that's a long story on its own, which maybe we should do an attempt to explain of that at some point. For now though, Bullseye/Hawkeye has been contracted to take down Deadpool. In the last issue, he managed to get an arrow right through Mr. Pool's noggin. So, in this issue, Deadpool takes it out and his brain is still half regenerated as he tries to take on Bullseye at this meat farm. Now listening to his half-formed brain, Deadpool takes cover into a meat locker and decides his best course of action is to, quote, be the meat, and he suits up in a butchered pig using it as makeshift armor. Wade charges Mr. I, who had conveniently run out of arrows, lands a good crack, rack, and a crock, and then takes a swift kick to the no man's land. The fight transitions to the kitchen where Bull's Hawkeye, or whatever you want to call him, comes at Wade with a buzzsaw, and Deadpool, wielding 2 meat hooks, trips, grips, and sends a hook straight through this fellow mercenary's chest. The dynamic between these two psychos is just a treat to read, but I'd honestly recommend just reading the whole of this volume of Deadpool itself. It's fantastic. Number 7, Superman and the Manchester Black Beatdown. What's so funny about truth, justice, and the American way? I don't know. But what I do know is that the Superman story that uses that question as its title, also known as Action Comics issue number 775 for any of you who want to know, is awesome. Essentially, this comic sees the arrival of a group of heroes called the Elite that fight crime but in an incredibly bombastic and brutal way with no regard for lives lost. This flies directly in the face of the moralities of heroes like Superman and Batman, but apparently not. The leader of this band of villainous heroes goes by the name Manchester Black, and he has an incredible level of telekinesis, able to punch a hole in a mountain with a simple thought. He is incredibly capable, and so are his team, fixing problems before Superman can even get to the scene. Now eventually, Superman, attempting to stop them from operating using such brutal forms of justice, gets his butt handed back to him during one of their first altercations. But that was Superman with the gloves on. As fast as a speeding bullet, Superman takes down the other 3 members of the Elite, leaving only Manchester Black left. Now in a move colder than I've ever seen before, Superman subtly uses his heat vision through Manchester's eye and cuts the connection between Chester and his telekinetic powers. Essentially, he lobotomized Chester using his heat vision, taking the ability to use his powers at least until the JLA could arrive, and he left the Elite in an unconscious dog pile. Number 6, Magneto beating Apocalypse. Magneto and Apocalypse are two incredibly powerful mutant villains with frighteningly similar goals, and yet we never really fully see them teaming up. But we also rarely ever see them fight either, except in the Age of Apocalypse reality. In this world, the Mutant Legion had gone back in time in an attempt to bring an end to Magneto, but he inadvertently caused the passing of Xavier, his father, which led to a world where Magneto forms and leads the X-Men, and Apocalypse has nearly taken over the whole world. This all came to a head in X-Men Omega. Now, on paper, while Magneto is powerful with a capital P, when compared to Apocalypse, he should be a walk in the park for the second mutant to ever exist, and their fight going on simultaneously with about 3 or 4 other little skirmishes is intense. It's full of great lines, crazy twists and turns, but the best part is right near the end. Apocalypse has Magneto on the ropes, and he gloats in his own glory, wondering why the Master of Magnetism isn't fighting back. Now, staring straight into Apocalypse's eyes, Magneto says, "I can't, I'm concentrating." And then they both look down to see Magneto's hands at his abdomen as he completely rips Apocalypse in two straight down the middle in the most awesome looking panel I have ever seen. It's so good. Number 5. Invincible. Invincible, Mark Grayson, is an incredibly strong character. Being a Viltrumite, Invincible is a member of one of the most unbeatable species in the galaxy. Mark is also a young adult, who hasn't learned how to control himself or his powers completely, so it's interesting that one of his greatest enemies is an incredibly squishy man by the name of Angstrom Levy. That's because Angstrom is pretty intelligent and ruthless, but also because he has the ability to open portals to alternate realities. Using his knowledge of other dimensions, he was able to figure out the alter ego of Invincible and find out where Mark lives. He travels to Mark's home and then captures Mark's mom and brother. First of all, making things this personal never works out for a villain, so they need to stop doing that. But Angstrom does actually put Mark through a good old fight, using portals to send the hero to multiple different dimensions, which was really cool, honestly. Where Levy made a big mistake though was when Mark's mom, Debbie, decides to try and attack the villain using a lamp, smashing it over Levy's big old head. Levy didn't take too kindly to this little affront, and he broke Debbie's arm. Now, in a fit of absolute blinding rage after seeing this, Mark charges full force at Levy, and they end up crashing through multiple realities until they land in a sandy desert wasteland, which is when this idiotic guy Levy decides to threaten Mark's family again. Invincible, still in this blind rage, uses all the strength he has, completely pummeling Levy until Mark looks like he's covered in ketchup and Angstrom is now a huge puddle. But somehow, he still comes back. Number 4, Conquest. Yes, we're still talking about Invincible. For the Viltrumites of this Invincible comic series, they have extremely high resistance to damage, but what makes them even more capable is that when they do get beat down, usually by another Viltrumite, and they survive the damage, once they heal up, they become even stronger than they were before. It's why the oldest Viltrumites are usually the most powerful of the bunch. Now, one old-timer Viltrumite goes by the name of Conquest, and he is one grizzled old man. Battle-scarred as hell with a cybernetic arm and psychotic as hell as well, he arrives on Earth to check on Mark's progress with taking over the planet. That's a whole long story, we don't need to get into it. Essentially, he arrives after Mark had just gone through some I can't say that. So Mark is not in the best mood, but Conquest does not care, and these two have an absolute slog of a battle over the course of 4 issues of the comic. It's insane. Conquest takes a few hits, sure, but Mark is no match for this guy in the slightest. In an attempt to help Invincible, his girl, Adam Eve, decides to show up on the battlefield and lend a hand, and she was far out of her league, but she's very powerful, didn't really matter. Conquest punched a hole right through her. This was the line that you just don't cross. It sends Mark into a frenzy. The two Superman-like beings fly straight at one another, and Mark punches straight through Conquest's cybernetic arm, breaking his own arm in the process. He uses his unbroken hand to clock the old man in the face, he bites a massive chunk out of the guy's shoulder, Adam Eve revives herself out of nowhere, lends a helpful blast, and then when Conquest breaks Mark's other hand, this guy uses his head and headbutts Conquest over and over and over again. It was like 15 hits until what was once his head is now a stomped on can of crushed tomatoes. I don't know if we can even show this one, but it's just insane. Number 3, Squirrel Girl versus Dr. Doom. Look, we're talking comic books here, okay? Just Keep that in mind. In Marvel Superheroes number 8 from 1992, in one corner we've got the full, untested, unbridled powerhouse of Squirrel Girl. And then, in the other corner, we have the Fantastic Four's top enemy, the ruler of Latveria, the man who has wielded the power of the Beyonder, constantly blends incredible technology with powerful magic and artifacts, fueled by his massive, deserved ego. It's the one and only Dr. Victor Von Doom. Who's the winner? Obviously, it's Squirrel Girl, what the hell? Summoning a monstrous horde of squirrels that completely swarm Doom as he cries out, "My much vaunted technology, decimated by these gnawing rodents." And he escapes through a trap door, diving into a river and leaving behind his mask, which Squirrel Girl takes as a trophy. Of all the defeats on this list, this one is definitely brutal. Completely tore that man's pride straight from him and sent him running and screaming with a whole cacophony of squirrels. Damn. That was kinda fun. Number 2, Mr. Dumpo. I know, I'm surprised the Punisher has not shown up on this list too, until now. Honestly, I can tell you why. The Punisher doesn't really have that many memorable villains because his whole thing is that he doesn't let them live. Usually his villains are gone from existence by the end of the issue, and definitely before the end of the series. And usually he does it very quickly and very easily, but definitely not always. In the Punisher Volume 5, number 11, the Punisher is facing off against a guy called the Russian, who was hired by another bigger bad who we talk about just in a moment. When the two finally come face to face, the fight sees them tumble through Frank's apartment building, crashing into the apartment of Frank's neighbor, Mr. Dumpo. Mr. Dumpo is not the smallest man. In fact, I'd say he's quite large. Yeah, that's how I'd put it. Using a fresh out of the oven scalding hot slice of pizza belonging to Mr. Dumpo, Frank burns the Russian's face, and then Frank then takes Mr. Dumpo and tosses him on top of the Russian and dogpiles on top, suffocating the Russian to his demise. Could you imagine going out like that? Just take a moment and think about it. That would be horrible. Number 1, Ma Gnocchi. That's how I'm gonna say it. I said we were about to talk about another Punisher villain, and I wasn't lying. Ma Gnocchi, or however you tell me how you pronounce that in the comments below. Just I can't figure it out. She's the head of the Gnocchi crime family, so yeah, she ain't really a nice lady. Now, before the moment I'm about to talk about, Frank had thought that he had already neutralized the threat of old Ma here, and that's because he literally fed her to a gaggle of polar bears. Now, while they didn't finish her off, the bears did happen to relieve Ma of her arms and legs. It was that action that prompted the hiring of the Russian at the last point. Now in the Punisher Volume 5, number 12, after taking down about 80, yes 80 of her thugs, Punisher comes back to finish the job. 80 men were already obliterated, so no one was willing to lend the legless and armless head of crime a hand as Frank burned down her mansion. She put up a decent fight with no limbs though, sort of. After she attempted to gnaw his ankles off, unsurprisingly unsuccessfully, Frank uses his big old foot, plus the muscles in his leg, and not so gently places this helpless, horrible woman into the burning pyre that used to be her home. Cold. Or hot, actually, cause fire. But coming in at number 10 is Jack Frost. When Jimmy Olsen was on a game show back in the Silver Age series Superman's Pal Jimmy Olsen, number 33, a special prism appeared randomly in a garbage dump that, for some reason, turned the thoughts of the game show contestants into reality. Just go with it, it's a comic book, okay? So, when Jimmy answered a game show question with Jack Frost, that's exactly who appeared. Jack Frost, as a villain, threatened to plunge the world into a new ice age. Now I'm sure that's not at all what Jimmy had in mind, but luckily he is Superman's pal, so what was Superman's solution? Simple. He would just go fly into space and move the frickin' sun closer to the Earth. Not only is this an absolutely ridiculous feat, which is theoretically completely impossible, but it was incredibly embarrassing looking for Jack Frost, who had to run away from Superman, who was essentially chasing the freezing villain with the sun. Once Jack Frost had retreated into a deep, cold cave, Superman put the sun back where he got it so it didn't destroy the Earth. The bonkers part about this is that he did all this nonchalantly as if he was moving furniture. Number 9, Hank Henshaw. After Superman's infamous death at the hands of Doomsday and his not exactly surprising return to life, Superman had to clean up the messes made in his absence, including some imposter Supermen. One of which would be the cyborg Superman, Hank Henshaw, that took over the role of Superman in his place. This cyborg wasn't really doing a great job with his Supermaning, and I think most would agree that he was really tarnishing the name of Superman. Because he was. Hank ruined Soup's memorial, and more importantly, he had just blown up Coast City, taking the life of millions of people. Now, when Superman actually returns from the dead, he doesn't have his powers back just yet, so the conflict actually lasts a little while. But once Superman gets his powers back, you best believe he beats this sucker, and in one page no less. Hank is a cyborg, like I said, so Superman ends this guy by simply punching him straight through the chest and then using his super speed to shake him so fast his screws come loose and he just straight up falls apart. Superman shook this sucker to death. Number 8. The Marquis of Death. In 2009's Fantastic Four number 566, Dr. Victor Von Doom reveals to us and his people that he had learned almost everything he knows from one incredibly powerful reality warping villain called the Marquis of Death. With his master now on his way to see how Dr. Doom had fared as ruler over the Earth. Only when the Marquis shows up with his mysterious new apprentice, he was less than happy with the progress Doom had made on Earth, and to punish his old apprentice, he attacks. The Marquis completely warped reality, making Doom think he had actually won the fight, and then snatched the victory away, set him on fire, turned his heart to stone and his blood to acid, and then sent him back in time to the Pliocene age to be eaten by megalodons. Do you realize how insane that sentence is on its own? That should be the point right there. But over the course of the rest of the story, the Marquis goes on to fight the Fantastic Four, almost beating them, but he is brought to a point of nearly being beaten, which is when, out of nowhere, his apprentice, the new one, shows up and slaps and destroys this reality warping villain, but not before revealing that he is actually Dr. Doom himself. Apparently, Dr. Doom survived being eaten by megalodons and being turned to stone and his blood to acid, gained enough power and dark magic to completely change his form, became the Marquis' new apprentice, even defeating Uatu the Watcher so he wouldn't be discovered, and he did all of that to hide in plain sight to get his revenge and finally defeat the Marquis of Death. If you guys are enjoying this list so far, make sure you check out the rest of the channel for parts 1 to 3 and maybe subscribe while you're there so you don't miss part 5 and all the rest of our comic book loving content. Thank you. Number 7. Storm and Emma Frost. A bit of a lesser known rivalry between two comic book characters is the one between Aurora Monroe, Storm of the X-Men, and Emma Frost, the White Queen of the Hellfire Club. Now back in the day, Emma was a villain more than anything else, and during Uncanny X-Men 151 and 152, the White Queen ambushed Storm using her telepathic powers to swap their bodies, and then enacted a plan for the Hellfire Club to attack the X-Mansion. Now after a whole lot of kerfuffle involving Kitty Pryde, Emma lost control of Storm's powers, and that gave Storm the opportunity to swap their minds back. Storm gets the tempest caused by Frost under control, then saves the White Queen from a massive fall, all heroic-like, but being the villain, Emma tries yet again to attack Miss Monroe, prompting Storm to straight up smack Emma with a massive bolt of lightning. She flies up into the air, raging like the goddess she is, then flies back down, grabs Frost by the throat, and scares the hell out of her by almost taking her life before Wolverine, of all people, talks her back to morality. It's fantastic. I love Emma Frost, but I think because of this, I love Storm a little bit more. Number 6. Kingpin vs Grey Hulk. The Hulk is an interesting character. He's gone through many changes over time, even having different identities than just his regular green, savage, smashy smash one. One of his first, when he was still a Grey Hulk, would be Joe Fixit. Joe Fixit is a persona of the Hulk who is a relatively intelligent Las Vegas mob enforcer. It's great. Well, this year, in 2023, he got his own series. Fixit is specifically the enforcer for the Berengeti crime family, and in the series, Mr. Berengeti's operation becomes the focus of a certain Wilson Fisk, aka the Kingpin of Crime, who is planning to strong-arm a takeover. Problem is, you can't really strong-arm anything when one of the people you're facing off against is the Incredible Hulk. The best part about Joe Fixit is the fact that no one seems to be able to work out that he is just another version of the Hulk, so he is constantly underestimated. Within the first few moments of Kingpin's meeting with Mr. Berengeti, the plan he had goes south very quickly, and he decides to smash the man's desk, which is when Mr. Fixit enters the fray. Fisk's goon is slapped aside like a piece of unwanted salami, and then Fisk, who has gone toe-to-toe with Spider-Man, who, as we know from part 1 of this list, is usually holding back, comes bull charging at Fixit, who obviously tanks tanks 3 blows without flinching before grabbing Wilson's fist, hoisting the massive villain over his head, and then throwing him through the floor into the casino, and then picking him up and slamming him down into the floor again, and then holding his arm hostage until Fisk says that the meeting is over in English, then French, then Pig Latin. Priceless. And at number 5 is Batman vs the Hyper Clan. This point is eerily similar to the Manchester Black vs Superman point on part 2 of Brutal Villain Defeats. In 1997's JLA, helmed by Grant Morrison, a team of superheroes shows up on Earth and begins fixing problems and completely eradicating supervillains, gaining popularity with the people that rivals the Justice League. The difference here is that this team of superheroes are actually white Martians. Unsurprisingly, the first of the Justice League to find this out was Batman himself, who managed to evade being captured unlike the rest of the League. Sneaking into the HyperClan's base, he managed to lure one of their members, a mortal, who he strung up with a little Batarang-held sign that read, "I know your secret." When 3 other members of the HyperClan showed up, Batman brought them down with a single match and a circle of gasoline, turning their one weakness to fire into his greatest ally, because he's Batman. Number 4. Darkseid. Darkseid is not a character you mess with. He's incredibly powerful with an insanely capable mind, and the ability to practically never pass away. Sure, we could talk about his defeat at the hands of Batman, but that's kinda boring. Batman's a regular guy, sure, but he's also Batman. What we want to talk about is Volume 3, Issue number 2 and 3 of this comic called Superpowers. This comic was made to go along with a toy line, so we already should slightly suspend our knowledge of what various heroes and villains are actually capable of for right now. Now in the story, Darkseid's Omega effect had been dwindled to almost nothing thanks to Mr. Miracle, Tyr, and Mr. Freeze. After being betrayed by his people, he winds up teleporting to Earth with the last of his energy. Now, covered in a cloak, Darkseid is forced to rob a store just to find more clothes and remain unnoticed. But just after he does so, Darkseid is confronted by a pair of muggers in an alleyway. A pair of regular old human muggers who bully him, threaten him, and then knock him out cold with a chain just to rifle through his pockets and run off into the night. But the best part is how he looks up with a big Darkseid frown and goes, "Oh, surely my plight can sink no lower." You never see Darkseid like this, and certainly not in a fedora and a trench coat. Mwah. Number 3, Staro vs the Justice League. Despite how ridiculous the idea of a massive starfish-looking alien that can control minds is, Staro the Conqueror is still one of the Justice League's earliest and most dangerous foes. All the way back in the Brave and the Bold issue 28 from 1960 is our first ever introduction to Staro. Now this was before he used starfish facehuggers to control minds and instead would use a telepathic beam to control huge scores of people. When Staro did this to a town of people using one of his deputies, the Flash happened to take note of the fact that one kid, Snapper Carr, who was possibly the most annoying kid to grace the pages of comics, was immune to the effects of Staro's mental control. But it was a mystery as to why. It turns out that Snapper was covered in calcium oxide, aka lime, from when he was working on a lawn earlier in the day. Lime, used by oystermen to fight starfish off of their oysters, also happens to block the powers of Staro, curiously enough, and so Green Lantern grabs a bunch of barrels of the stuff from a nearby farm, and the Flash grabs bags and bags of it from a chemical warehouse, and they team up to proceed to absolutely cover Staro in lime, imprisoning the Conqueror in an unbreakable shell of lime. As it says in the comics, a living statue of lime. Number 2, Firestorm vs Parasite. Rudolph Jones found himself exposed to a strange form of radiation, which changed him into a bald, green-skinned parasite with the ability to absorb the life energy of others. Well, in Firestorm, the Nuclear Man, issue number 86, Parasite is released from an area he is being held in and goes on a rampage, draining multiple people of their life energy, including Firehawk, who fell pretty easily to this villain. Now luckily, the hero Firestorm is nearby. At this point in time, Firestorm has become the world's fire elemental and received a pretty significant power boost. Almost as if to prove this, Firestorm comes in hot on Parasite with a blast of flame, and then, when Parasite tries to drain Firestorm's power, the hero is completely unaffected as he says, quote, "My powers come not from myself, but from the earth. I don't have power, I am power." And in a last-ditch effort, Parasite decides to try and trade energy blasts with Firestorm. Now unfortunately for Parasite, it is nowhere near an equal fight. He uses up all of the energy he took from Firestorm, and then just trying to hold back Firestorm's blast, Parasite goes through his own reserved life energy until he is on the brink. Realizing he will lose, he begs Firestorm to stop, saying that Firestorm would bring the end for Parasite, to which Firestorm simply says, "That was my intention." Luckily for him, Parasite was saved by the allies of Firestorm who told him to stop, but this hero left Parasite emaciated from using up his own energy. And finally, and at number 1 is Joker versus the Red Skull. Now look, the Joker is a maniac, an absolutely insane criminal lunatic, but hey, he is an American criminal lunatic, goddamn. Which means dealing with someone with the past of the Red Skull is an absolute no-no. Yes, these two villains teamed up together in the Batman and Captain America Team-Up Special, back when DC and Marvel actually got along with each other. Naturally, these heroes' two greatest villains team up to take them on, but I guess it turns out that even Joker is above the morals of a World War II era war criminal. The Red Skull hires the Joker to steal an atomic doomsday device, which the Clown Prince of Crime totally agrees to do, until he sees Red Skull waltz out with a certain symbol front and center on his outfit, indicating his involvement in WW2, which is then confidently confirmed by the Red Skull. This is when the Joker delivers the line about being an American criminal lunatic, and the two simultaneously attack each other, Joker with his venom and the Red Skull with his, quote, dust of death, which they are both immune to. This is when Joker gets smacked over the back of the head with a wrench, but eventually the fight makes it onto a plane where the Joker overpowers Red Skull and they both go tumbling down through the sky alongside the atomic device they stole, destroying them both in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Now I don't know if I'm more shocked at Joker's switching of sides or the fact that they had a fist fight while straddling the top of an active fat boy. It could be either, I don't know.